And if you notice one thing about today's NFL guys going into the draft, before I bring Mike Golic on, when Mike and I were drafted, you had guys from like Prairie View State or Texas A&I or Alcorn State. You know what you don't have today? You have none of that because of the portal. These guys are all coming from big programs. Why? Because there's better coaching at those big programs. And now you don't have to sit 3 deep at Alabama or Clemson. You can go to any of those schools now and get that coaching and the visibility you need to get drafted. You're not going to see a lot of small programs any longer, especially in the first 2 rounds. It's not going to happen. All right, there's a big debate going on in Philly. And I'll tell you this before I get started. Mike Golic, not just an awesome player, but also an awesome broadcaster. He joins us now here on the National Football Show. Hey, Mike, I guess it's not so easy to replace Mike and Mike, is it? Hey, not to throw shade on Keyshawn or anybody else. Hey, but Mike, just like when me and you played back in the day. Oh, so you're going to replace me with him, and then, okay, well, let's see how that works. I don't know, Mike. It's not a feather in your hat or anything, but I wonder how you felt about that. That's a legendary show, Mike. You've got to have a little bit going, hey, the reason we had so much success.
Well, I mean, listen, there's always pride in what you did. And, it's just like when you played football. I got cut twice, cut from the Houston Oilers and then cut from the Miami Dolphins. And you want to prove them wrong, right? You want to say you guys made a mistake. So after Houston, I went to Philly and things went pretty well there. So I felt good about that. And then when I went to Miami and got cut, I wanted to make them feel bad, but nobody else in the league called, so I retired. So that didn't work out as well. When people say, oh, when did you retire? I'm like, no. How it works is, for most of us, the league retires you. You don't get a say on when you leave. Listen, my biggest thought right away, Dan, in all honesty, was I feel bad for ESPN Radio, for what was built even before I was there. Started in 92 and 93. Tony Bruno, Chuck Wilson. Tony Bruno was my first partner when we started the National Morning Show. It wasn't Mike and Mike. It was the morning show on ESPN Radio, and it was me and Tony Bruno. And it lasted for a year, and then Greeny and I took over for another 17, 18 years, and then Trey and my son for 3 years after that. And, now, unfortunately, the morning show, at least, is that National Morning Show is going away. I don't know what's going to go in its place. So there really isn't. I'm kind of too far removed from it to say, oh, good, this is what you get for stopping our show. I'm past all that. I didn't want Mike and Mike then. We've talked about this before, but it did, through the circumstance that it went through. And it's fine. You move on. Because the one thing I will say is when I got cut from Houston and went to Philly and wanted to show Houston you made a mistake, though in all honesty, I didn't think a lot about Houston. It's not like I was watching Houston saying, oh, look how they're struggling. I was worried about being in Philly and playing well there. So when I left radio, left ESPN, I was like, okay, what's next? I want to do well there. So I feel bad for what radio, because you think about it, it's 92, 93. That's only 30 years. I mean, it's not, that thing should still be huge. Now, is it partly because radio itself, terrestrial radio, is getting shifted away from live streaming and podcasts? That could be it as well. Is it tougher to start a show up like those guys had to start it up during COVID, by the way? I mean, those guys had one arm tied behind their back, having to start it up in COVID, couldn't be in the same spot. And then you have more eyes on you right out of the gate. Greeny and I got to go 3 years or so working out all the kinks because we weren't on that many affiliates to start out. So we got to kind of get rolling a little bit before we were heard by a lot of people. You start a show today, especially on a major network like ESPN, you're instantly in front of millions of people. So you get that initial reaction. And I think it was made tough on those guys, given the circumstances. In all honesty, if there's any blame to be put on it, I would look above to management, a couple of people in management who have kind of, unfortunately maneuvered ESPN radio in the wrong direction. And, it's struggling now. But again, I personally don't know, maybe you know more than me about where terrestrial radio is right now, and is it hurt in a lot of places because of all the other avenues you can get content?
I think a lot of it's diluted, Mike. And plus, now you have to be concerned, and a lot of people, especially in radio, are concerned with advertisers.
Yeah.
And with streaming, you don't have as many guardrails, and they're not as tight, Mike, where
Right.
you could kind of go down topics.
Yep.
Where you and I, when we first started, we could go down. Today, we could never go down many of those topics because it's just a different environment and how you project those topics now. So, I mean, back in the day, you were talking about the black quarterback in the NFL and how he's making a great statement. And then today, you kind of say that someone will dissect that on you and turn that into something that it's not. And I just think hosts today, Mike, are a little bit more cognizant of that. And that's why podcasting and streaming shows have given more vehicles. And I think it's easier to listen to, and it's an easier listen.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I hope terrestrial radio isn't fully going away. And locally, I know it's still does fine in whatever markets, but we're talking about national now. And in all honesty, listen, I like those guys that took over the show. There was never any animosity at all. There was a space available. It's just like when I get cut from a team, and a guy that's all of a sudden playing in my position. Why am I mad at that guy? I'm on a different team. There's a hole to fill, and that guy filled it. Those guys filled the morning show. I think they got put kind of with an arm tied behind their back that ESPN did it during COVID. Those guys didn't get a lot of time together to kind of, practice together. And I remember when me and Greeny started, and then me training my son, we traveled around to the different affiliates and met people. And before we even got on air, these guys didn't have a chance to do it because COVID was going on. So I think the timing of how it was done, that's why I don't put it as much on the guys on air. I put it more on the people who put them there, saying, I just think they really kind of strung them out and hung them out a little bit with how you want to get a show going. Those guys didn't really have a fair shot to do that.
Let me take you into the debate that's going on in Philadelphia right now with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
The debate is, Brian Westbrook came on, and so did Dick Vermeil. Dick Vermeil was asked the question about him running, and Vermeil said, why would you take running away? It's one of his assets. And then Brian Westbrook came out and said, hey, you've got to protect this guy because he was on pace for 200 carries, Mike. Mike, how should the Eagles go forward this year when it comes to coaching Jalen Hurts? Should he run more? Should he run less, in your opinion?
I have no problem how he's running right now. Listen, look what they tried to do with Josh Allen. After his rookie year, he ran really well, right? I mean, and this dude was a locomotive, a big dude who could run. And then his second year, they were like, okay, we gotta calm that down and have him throw more. And it wasn't going as well until he started running again. You're talking about Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. They're going to run him less. I'm sorry, if you're going to get to the promised land, and that's a Super Bowl, and you have a quarterback that can be a threat running, he's got to run. Now, does that mean you run him 17, 20 times a game? Maybe not. But you look at Hurts last year. He played 15 games, ran 165 times. So do the math, a little over 10 times a game. And those 10 times a game aren't always planned runs. They can be scrambles as well. We're in an era now where quarterbacks run and they can be dangerous running. Now, the good side of that is they're unbelievable weapons. Whether they're scrambling out of the pocket, making a defender have to commit to him running and then throwing it over the top, or the defender staying back, not sure what's going to happen, and the quarterback taking off. I'm sorry, I don't think you can legislate that. I think you've got to let these guys do what they do. Now, do you want to do less planned runs? Maybe you can do that a little bit. But these guys, the one thing about them, Dan, when they run, the amount of confidence they have in their legs to be able to get the job done, where maybe that throw, do they want to make that throw, or do they have more confidence in their legs to get the yards? They may take off and run. I don't think you can mute that. I really don't. I hear, like I said, I heard that about Lamar. I heard that about Jalen. But if you're going to get where you're going to go, you got to let these guys do what they do. The downside of that, I gave you the upside. The downside, you're possibly leading to injury. But Look at Lamar Jackson's injuries. They happened in the pocket. In all honesty, when these guys run, when these guys scramble and or run, they have more control on how they're getting hit or if they can get down and do a slide to avoid a hit. They can take bigger shots in the pocket, especially from the blind side or when there's trash around their legs. So when they're running, I actually think they have more control how that play ends. So I'm for letting these guys do what they do and not mute it.
You know, that's exactly what Phil Sims said on our show too, Mike. I mean, he's like, Dan, in open space, you have more control of the environment around you and where you are in that open space. So again, it's more about making business decisions. Hey, if I don't get the first down, why do I have to take the gigantic hit? And I say this, Mike, the thing that I want to see Jalen get better at this year is just to continue to improve on that decision-making, because the RPO, Mike, it's not a play call. It's a decision-making.
Right. Yes, it is.
You mean, because again, you could call an RPO in there, but Jalen has to go split decision.
Yep.
Do I keep it? Do I pass it? Do I run it? So you take progression reading completely out of the play, Mike. So, I mean, it's about him being continue to improve on his decision-making more so than even improving on his passing technique. Is that fair?
I agree. RPOs are a different world. RPOs are a read, and listen, you know immediately if you made the wrong read, right? I mean, that's the one thing about it. So you know who he's reading, you know where the read is, and you have to make so it's a quick decision, and is it the right decision? You know, and I don't know what the percentages are, or sometimes you make chicken salad out of you know what. If you don't make the right read, that's another positive thing about having a quarterback that can move. But yes, that is exactly what an RPO is. You're making that quick decision that you have to live with, and you hope you're making it more of a right decision than a wrong decision.
Mike, do you think Dallas and San Francisco have closed the gap at all on the Eagles in the NFC?
Well, I think San Francisco is right with Philly, maybe even more as far as roster on paper. Again, we don't play on paper, so you can only take that so far. But where's their biggest question mark? It's a quarterback, right? You got Brock Purdy now coming back from an injury, basically looking to get a leg up already. They're going to give it to him on Trey Lance at some point. And again, this isn't Trey Lance's fault. He's gotten injured because we still don't know. You traded up, you gave up assets to get him number 3. And the hardest thing for any coach and or GM decision maker to do is admit you made a mistake that high up. So a lot of people would think, well, they're going to give Trey Lance another shot. I don't think they are. I think Brock Purdy's the guy, and if he's healthy, Brock Purdy's going to be the guy. And I don't know what's going to end up with Trey Lance, but it's pretty interesting with a Sam Darnold there and a Trey Lance. They're both really high picks, and then you got Mr. Irrelevant there, Brock Purdy, as really the guy who's going to lead that team. But their roster is incredible. I would say them more than Dallas. I think Philly still has a good lead on Dallas. Dallas has some holes to fill, and some depth things as well, which every team worries about because you worry about injury. Philly last year, 2 years ago, they had O-line injuries that hurt them. Last year, not as much. That certainly helps because it's the best O-line in football. So I think San Francisco is close to them, a wider margin at the quarterback position in favor of Philadelphia. And I think Dallas has a little ways to go.
Mike, do you think that the rule changes in the NFL is part of the reason why we've diminished the running back position in the game today? Or do you think it's just an evolution, or do you think it's a cycle right now that we're in where wide receivers, tight ends are just, or do you really believe because the fullback has almost completely been extinct from the National Football League. When you and I played, that was a major component of the game.
Yeah.
You know, the Jerome, the Natron Meanses of the world and those guys, there's none of those guys in the sport outside the guy in San Francisco. I mean, what's happened to that position, Mike?
Well, the one thing you do see fullbacks now, not only they lead block, but they can catch the ball out of the backfield. So that's something that's changing as well. It's one of those things, Dan, we talk a lot about when something comes back, like when are the flare, bell-bottom jeans coming back, and I don't know if a dominant running team now, tough to say because we still kind of have one in the league, or have for the last couple of years in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
With Derrick Henry.
Yep.
I mean, Derrick Henry, that's a running team, and then they pass around it. but they only get so far and they can't get over that hump. It's a throwing league now. Running backs have to be of the versatile issue of running the ball, blocking, lining up in the slot, lining up wide like a wide receiver, looking for the mismatches in the passing game. Running is now, it was always running to set up the pass. Now, a lot of times it's the other way around, that if you can spread a team out and then run the ball, that's kind of what you do. A lot of times outside of short yardage, you see, say, we're going to line up, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball so much our O-line can go to the line of scrimmage to say, we're running the ball right at you and still do it. Hell, when I played, I mean, when we played Washington or we played Dallas, I mean, my God, that's what you had Emmitt Smith, you had the Hogs in Washington. It was a slugfest. You know, it was running to set up the pass. I don't think we're ever going back there. I think this is a more open game. The rules have opened it up that way. The rules have opened it up against our side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, with how you can cover someone, where you can hit them, how you can hit them. So it's opened it up for more big plays and high scoring, because that's what the league wants, because that's what they feel the fans want. So I don't ever think we're going back to that 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Two last questions for you, Mike. You think Dak Prescott in Dallas is over or underachieved?
Well, I mean, boy, that's a good question. I mean, they had the best O-line in football for a couple of years, and that's kind of on the downside. Yeah, one of the best backs in Zeke, and now he's probably not even going to be there. So I would say not winning with what they had at times, and now that are gone from that team, they probably underachieved. You know, we saw what they haven't won a Super Bowl in so long, and that's Jerry Jones. Obviously, all owners want to win, but some owners, let's be honest, can be more concerned about the bottom line than the product on the field. Jerry Jones is a guy, he wants the Super Bowl, no doubt about it. So, I would say they probably underachieved a little bit. It's getting to some interesting times with Dak Prescott now.
Here is the last one here. Now, I saw Aaron Rodgers at a Let's Get High convention.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, he's hanging out, and, the impact that he has on the Jets. There he was petitioning for shrooms in the NFL. I don't know, Mike. I mean, I don't know where we are with this. I mean, what's your thought process on his impact with the Jets? Look, I've said this before about him, Mike. I think he's the best thrower of the football I've ever seen.
I mean, listen, he's one of the most accurate guys I've ever seen throw a football, ever. If you're a receiver, you hit your knees every night, saying thank you, that I have a guy that's going to not only give a completion, but put the ball on me where I need it, or so I'm not going to get smoked, or I can continue running after the catch. Listen, we know his personality, whether it's, living in the dark room or, the psychedelics and doing shrooms. I mean, he's kind of that eccentric dude hosting Jeopardy. That's kind of what he likes to project. But the bottom line is Jet fans want him to be a great quarterback, right? That's what they want. And in Green Bay for a couple of years, they were 13-3 and couldn't get to the Super Bowl again. He's only got, the one Super Bowl. And then last year, they lose the last game when they had everything riding on it, and they couldn't win it against Detroit. I called that game for Westwood 1. So the Jets are sitting there looking pretty on defense. They're building some ammunition around him. I love Breece Hall, love him. Now, coming back from an ACL is tough. I think he hurt it in week 7. He was going to be the offensive rookie of the year, and he hurts it in week 7. So how good is he going to be? Maybe you get a Dalvin Cook for this year to help with that, because it's tough to think Breece is just going to be right at 100% and ready to go. Running back, I think Adrian Peterson threw it out askew for everybody when he came back in like 7 months from an ACL. That's not the norm. It's not the norm. So they're in a position to do well. Well, I know when they sign them, people saying, oh, they're the favorite. No, they're not. They're not the favorite. But they're a lot better off than what they had with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And they have a defense that's going to keep them in every game. That is huge. So now you'll be in close games, and you have Aaron Rodgers with some weapons at quarterback. The only problem is you're in a pretty tough division. That's for sure.
Mike, in closing, could you imagine the Gang Green group with Buddy Ryan and Randall on Hard Knocks with all you guys? I thought when I saw the Jets got named the Hard Knocks team, I was like, when you were so so awesome to do this today. I'm like, can you imagine Jerome and Reggie and all them guys on Hard Knocks?
I could not. Outside, and the good thing is, then when they replay it on HBO later at night, they don't beep anything out. So outside of Reggie, there would have been so much cussing in that thing, and it would have been wild. I don't know if there's a team that had more A personalities on it than that team. And I think one of the best things would have been if Seth Joyner wasn't in a good mood and the camera tried to be on him, the look he would give them and then the threat he would make to them if the camera didn't get out of his face would have been priceless to see.
He comes on this program all the time, and I can't see somebody putting like a camera in front of him. Mike, that would have been worth the price of admission watching you guys with Wes Hopkins and
Andre
Waters and them guys.
Oh my God, Jerome, Reggie, Clyde Simmons, Byron Evans, Eric Allen. I mean, it would have been Ron Heller on the old line and Keith Jackson, Keith Byers. I mean, wow, it would have been amazing. We'd have had a lot of fun with it. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Hey, Mike, it's always great for you to spend as much time as you do with me. You always find time. Hey, tell folks what you're doing now, please.
So DraftKings, they started the sports network on Samsung TV and DraftKings.com, and they're going to expand that as well. So right now I'm doing a show with my son, Mike, and we're probably going to expand that in the fall, hopefully a little more. We'll see. So we're doing that. I'm back to doing every day a sports show again, which is a lot of fun because I get to do it with my kid. And then Westwood One, I do the NFL games, probably the Sunday night games again, myself and Ryan Radke. I've been doing the Sunday night games for the last couple of years, and I'll continue to do that. So while I'm not getting up every day at 4:15 anymore, I'm still involved because my wife won't let me retire. She doesn't want me around all the time.
Another Notre Damer, 2 Notre Damers in the house will never quit. That's for dang sure. Actually, 3 Notre Damers with your boys. Yep. Hey, and daughters, yes. By the way.
Right.
And daughters. Mike, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate it.
You got it, Dan.
You bet. That is Mike Golic. Make sure you check him out over on Twitter, too. And make sure you catch him out, too, this coming fall. What an absolutely spectacular guy. Please hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.